Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm reacting to another video from Dr. Jones, DC. This video is about preventing weight regain after stopping GLP-1 medications, and he references a January 2026 BMJ meta-analysis and the Danish S-LiGH study to make his case. This is actually one of his stronger videos from an evidence standpoint. Let's break it down. He opens by citing a British medical journal BMJ meta-analysis article published January 2026 across 37 studies and over 9,000 participants, showing that most people regain a substantial portion of lost weight within the first year after stopping GLP-1 medications, averaging around 0.4 kilograms per month in regain. This is accurate and consistent with what we've seen in the literature for years. The step 4 trial data he references is real, and people who stopped semaglutide regained roughly 6.9% of body weight over 48 weeks, while those who continued lost an additional 7.9%. That's a nearly 15 percentage point difference and is well documented. His analogy, stopping a GLP-1 and being surprised by weight regain, is like stopping blood pressure medication and being surprised your blood pressure goes up. It's actually a fair one. These drugs manage the neurobiological drivers of obesity. They don't cure the underlying condition. The moment you remove them, those drivers return. That's not a character flaw, that's pharmacology. The Danish S-LiGH study. The real evidence gold here. This is a centerpiece of the video and honestly the most important thing he covers, and he gets the core message right. The study compared 4 groups: GLP-1 alone, exercise alone, GLP-1 plus exercise, and placebo. After 1 year of treatment, everything stopped. No more medication, no more supervised exercise. Then they followed people for another full year. The headline finding is compelling. The combination group, medication plus exercise, maintained weight loss significantly better than medication alone, and critically, 1 year after stopping all interventions, people who had exercised during the medication period sustained substantially longer activity levels than those who had only taken the medication. The habit persisted. The behavior change was durable in a way that the pharmacological effect alone was not. His framing of this, the medication is the window, the habits are the foundation, is genuinely good clinical communication. This is exactly how I discuss GLP-1 therapy with clients. The appetite suppression creates a behavioral opportunity. The question is whether you use that opportunity to build something that lasts. In his third segment, he discussed resistance training and protein, which is solid guidance with one caveat. His resistance training recommendations are reasonable and evidence-based. 2 to 3 days per week, compound movements like squats, deadlift, presses, and rows, 3 to 4 sets, 6 to 12 reps, progressive overload, working to near muscle failure. This aligns well with the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines for muscle preservation during weight loss. His protein target, 1 gram per pound of target body weight, is on the higher end but defensible, particularly for people in a caloric deficit on GLP-1 medications who are at significant risk of losing lean mass. Most of the research supports somewhere between 1.2 and 1.6 grams per kilogram, and his formula lands in a similar range for most people. The one caveat I'd add, and this matters clinically, he recommends distributing protein across 3 to 4 meals at 25 to 40 grams per meal, which is solid. But for people who are genuinely nauseated on GLP-1 medications, which is very common, especially early on, hitting these protein targets can feel nearly impossible. His suggestion of protein shakes, bone broth, and small frequent high-protein snacks is practical, and I fully endorse that approach. The key message for anyone struggling here is protein first, always, before carbohydrates or fat at every meal, even if the meal is small. In the 6th segment, Dr. Jones outlines 6 maintenance strategies beyond protein and resistance training, and I want to go through them quickly. Behavioral programs with ongoing contact is well supported. The literature on obesity maintenance consistently shows that regular check-ins, monthly at minimum, significantly improve long-term outcomes. This isn't just a sales pitch for his coaching program. The evidence genuinely backs it up. Mediterranean-style dietary pattern also has strong maintenance data behind it. The emphasis on whole foods, healthy fats, fiber, and quality protein aligns with what we see in successful long-term weight maintainers. Regular self-weighing with accountability is supported by the National Weight Control Registry data, which has tracked thousands of people who've maintained significant weight loss long-term. Weekly weighing, looking at trends rather than daily fluctuations, is a well-established maintenance strategy. His recommendation of 200 to 300 minutes per week of moderate aerobic activity for maintenance, which is double the general health recommendation, is actually straight from obesity medicine guidelines. This is a number that surprises most people, but it's real, and I often recommend it as well. Maintenance requires more activity than most people expect. Hormonal optimization for perimenopausal and menopausal women is worth mentioning because he raises it briefly. He's right that estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone influence fat distribution, muscle mass, and metabolic health. This is genuinely underaddressed in standard GLP-1 care and worth a dedicated conversation with a menopause-informed physician or dietitian. In his fifth segment, he discusses the tapering question. He addresses whether to taper the dose gradually or stop cold turkey, and I appreciate that he's honest here. There's no solid research yet on the right tapering protocol. He's telling you what he does clinically, not what randomized controlled trials have proven. That is a fair and transparent distinction, and I respect that he makes it. His principle: taper slowly, assess stability at each step before decreasing further, and never taper without the behavioral foundation already in place, is clinically sensible, even if it isn't yet evidence-based in a formal sense. So with this said, here's what I'd add or push back on based on Dr. Jones' video. A few things I want to add that are absent or overemphasized here are, first and foremost, sleep. Sleep quality and duration are profoundly underrated drivers of weight regain. Poor sleep elevates ghrelin, suppresses leptin, increases cortisol, and drives cravings for hyperpalatable foods. If someone is building a metabolic safety net, sleep has to be in the conversation. Second, stress management. Chronic physiological stress elevates cortisol, which promotes visceral fat accumulation and drives insulin resistance independently of diet and exercise. The behavioral foundation he's describing is incomplete without addressing this. Third, I want to gently push back on the keto and carnivore endorsements at the end of the video. He mentions these as options he's a big fan of, and at the beginning of a metabolic health journey. For some people with significant insulin resistance, there may be a short-term rationale, but for long-term sustainability, the evidence for Mediterranean-style eating is far stronger than for carnivore specifically, and the fiber of phytonutrient losses on strict carnivore are a real concern. I'd be careful about presenting that as broadly recommended. Finally, the coaching program promotion is again present throughout. Multiple calls to action, discovery calls, text to on-screen numbers. Typically, most people would say that this is okay, this is generally good, but you don't need a paid coaching program. And I will say, no, you probably don't need a paid coaching program, but sometimes you can find the best physician or registered dietitian or health coach in a paid coaching program. I myself have a paid coaching program, so I'm not against it. I'm not going to knock what he's doing, and if this helps someone generally get the help that they need and they get the results that they want and get improvements in their life that they want sustainably, I'm all for it. Nothing against it here. This is probably one of my favorite videos of Dr. Jones so far, the Danish SLIGH study. And I think you might could say SLIGH or SLIGH study, the Danish SLIGH study framing is genuinely important. The core message about using the medication as a window to build behavioral infrastructure is clinically sound, and the practical guidance on protein and resistance training is actionable. The bottom line is this: if you're on a GLP-1 medication right now, or any other type of weight loss medication such as phentermine, Rybelsus, Contrave, anything that suppresses your appetite or slows your metabolism, or both, the most valuable thing you can do with that window is build the habits that will outlast the drug. Start resistance training, prioritize protein, build consistent movement into your daily life, because when the medication stops, biology comes back. Your job is to have built something strong enough to meet it. Drop your question in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.